Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a professor for social work management, and you are listening to Managing Around, the bi-weekly podcast about social science, culture, and management. Managing Around is part of the Talk About Organizations podcast network, a community resource and discussion platform for key ideas in management and organization studies, which is supported by our listeners.
Games are an integral part of human culture from the early days of our life. They encourage us to interact with each other and with our surroundings to discover new perspectives. Moreover, they enhance the personality and help us to reflect on our own strengths and weaknesses. But how can we use game-based learning in education? How can educators be equipped with the necessary competencies to explore such new ways in their teaching? In this episode, I will discuss a few insights we have gained in a recent cross-national project about gamification in teaching at VET schools, vocational education schools. I will start with the question, what does gamification or game-based learning mean for education? And thereafter, I will present a learning architecture we have developed in the previously mentioned project. Let's start with the first question. What does gamification or game-based learning mean for education? Gamification in general is the strategic attempt to enhance systems, services, organizations, and activities in order to create similar experiences to those experienced when playing games. Gamified elements in learning situations help to motivate and to encourage participants. A game opens up a surreal context and reality that is more or less protected from negative consequences in real life. As components in educational contexts, games have been proven effective in supporting, for example, problem-based learning, informal education at different levels. If we talk about game-based learning, on the other hand, it refers to the use of certain gaming principles, elements, and tools, and applying them to real-life settings to engage users with educational materials in a playful and dynamic way. Furthermore, current meta-studies on the effectiveness of game-based learning show significant effects on the learning through integrating games in the classroom. Game-based learning has a beneficial impact on the motivation to learn, can generate flow experiences, and counteracts negative learning experiences. Failure while playing as part of the learning process is accepted as part of the game. It provides motivation for new attempts, and it does not necessarily lead to frustration. At the cognitive level, games can prevent overload and promote transfer between theory and practice through different and adaptable learning styles and learning paths. On the socio-cultural level, game-based learning promotes the social inclusion of learners, and it also promotes collective learning processes, including informal contexts such as communities of practice. Game-based learning goes beyond the learning of specific skills to the learning of transferable skills, also referred to the 21st century skills. In vocational education and training, the VET, which was, however, the main interest of our project GateVET, individual and collaborative game scenarios could be used to simulate situations and tasks of everyday work life or typical professional situations. While the beneficial effects of game-based learning have been extensively studied, teachers and trainers often remain reluctant to implement game-based learning approaches in formal educational settings for technical, institutional, or organizational reasons, such as difficulties in finding suitable games for teaching, or the lack of guidance on how to use games for teaching. The overall goal of the GateVET project was to increase the gamification readiness among VET teachers and to build up a community for game-based learning in vocational education and training. The project's main purpose was to develop an understanding of game-based learning and to provide a qualification and communication platform that facilitates the use of games and game elements in vocational education and training. Furthermore, it aimed to expand the methodological repertoire of teachers by giving them the opportunity to enrich their lessons with game-based elements and concepts. The consortium consists of European VET providers from Denmark, Germany, and Romania, a technology partner from France, and 2 higher education partners from the UK and Germany. Let's come to the second part of our podcast today, which is about the learning architecture for game-based learning in vocational education and training. As part of the GateVET project, a learning architecture has been developed to increase gamification readiness among VET teachers. Game-based readiness is understood as a concept that goes beyond competence-based approaches, which address the individual willingness to engage in certain activities, such as using gamification and game-based elements in teaching and learning. We assumed that vocational school teachers are more likely to use game scenarios and ideas in everyday teaching if they recognize these didactic elements as a valuable and integral resource for their own teaching practices. The learning architecture developed consists of 3 interlinked components: an online knowledge base, a mobile learning system, and a training of the trainer's curriculum. One component of the learning architecture is an online knowledge base in a wiki format. The wiki is suited for entries with more details and allows the community to continuously develop and extend the content bases. Users can contribute by creating their own entries and or editing existing content. They can also add comments or questions to existing entries. These functions are aimed at enabling peer learning and the exchange of ideas between educational practitioners. The linkage between the glossary and the educational sheets facilitate the simultaneous learning of game-based learning theory and practice. The wiki entries can contain images, file attachments, and links to related internal as well as relevant external content. The wiki is freely available on our website. If this idea caught your interest, please consult the show notes. A gamified mobile application is the second component of this learning architecture. Based on a micro-learning approach and organized as a toolbox, the mobile learning system contains short articles that provide micro versions of the wiki's glossary, as well as educational sheet entries. Furthermore, the mobile learning system offers minigames, flashcards, and quizzes, which provide training opportunities for the advancement of game-based learning skills and stimulate users' interest. You will find the links to the different app stores in the show notes. And last but not least, to enable teachers to use game-based learning in the classroom, a training of trainers curriculum has been developed. Herewith, a series of gamified activities were implemented to guide the users to explore, to test, and to apply the knowledge presented in the online knowledge base and the mobile learning system. Educators learn about game-based learning by doing game-based learning. In the training, teachers also learn how to use both platforms and adapt the examples for their teaching practice. We now come to the end of this podcast, and let us reflect on the lessons learned. It is important to note that the use and application of game scenarios in everyday teaching is highly dependent on a variety of other factors that have not been explored in today's podcast. Especially structural and institutional requirements can often be barriers to learning, such as, and I quote from Schmitz et al., 2015, a lack of access, lack of training, disruptions, cheating, or access to inappropriate information on the internet, end of quote. As it is well known, a teaching concept will only be effective and successful if teachers' attitude is shaped by an openness to change, willingness to cooperate, and readiness to use available resources. These and other factors are of paramount importance for future research to better understand the process of the effective and successful implementation of game-based learning in different teaching and learning environments. And we have to explore the different dimensions of the didactics, technology use, economy, organization, and culture. If you are interested in this last mentioned fact, please consult podcast 34 about the didactical framework for implementing virtual learning exercises in higher education institutions in this podcast of Managing Around. The project GateVET, which I highlighted today, provides a low threshold approach to game-based learning in vocational education and training. If you are interested in this project and in the results and the full study, please consult the show notes. And recently, we also published on our website www.let-them-play.eu a blog-based handbook for teachers.
Thank you for listening. Managing Around, the bi-weekly podcast about social science, culture, and management. Managing Around is part of the Talk About Organizations podcast network, a community resource and discussion platform for key ideas in management and organization studies, which is supported by our listeners. If you liked this episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast website. There's also a link in the show notes. If you've got any thoughts on this episode, or if you've got any idea about new podcast topics or questions you'd like to discuss, send me an audio file or voice note to hi@profmanagement.de. For any non-audio comments, drop a tweet or DM to @profmanagement on Twitter or Instagram, please. For more information, visit my website www.profmanagement.de. Thank you for listening and see you next time.